A millionaire patient pretends to be in a coma, but when he hears his nurse's confession, hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The fluorescent lights hummed softly along the quiet corridor of Westbridge Private Hospital. It was close to midnight, and most of the building had fallen silent except for the distant rhythm of heart monitors. Nurse Anna Monroe adjusted her badge, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. It was her first night assigned to a patient no one else wanted to care for, a man the staff whispered about as if he were both legend and ghost. Room 907. That was where the billionaire lay. Grant Carter, the 32-year-old tech magnate whose name once ruled headlines before the tragic car accident that left him in a supposed coma. No one knew that Grant Carter was not asleep at all. Behind the stillness, behind the tubes and wires, his mind was awake, listening, remembering, and testing. The world had betrayed him. His brother had stolen his company's trust. His fiancée had walked away when the money seemed uncertain. So Grant made a decision only a man stripped of faith would make. He would pretend to be unconscious, just to see if anyone around him still possessed a genuine heart. When Anna entered the room for the first time, she froze. The suite looked more like a hotel penthouse than a hospital room. Soft lights glowed over polished wood and white linen. Machines breathed steadily beside the motionless figure on the bed. His face was pale, his jaw strong, his lips slightly parted. And if not for the slow rise and fall of his chest, he could have been mistaken for marble. Anna stepped closer, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the floor. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," she whispered, as if the man could hear her. "I am Anna. I will be taking care of you tonight." She set her small notebook beside the monitor and began her routine, checking vitals, adjusting the IV, smoothing the blanket. Everything she did was precise, almost reverent. From behind closed eyelids, Grant listened. Her voice was calm, carrying no trace of the pity or greed he had grown used to from others. There was something steady about her, something human. She hummed quietly while cleaning his hands, an old melody that reminded him of the nights before ambition had consumed his life. "You must have been someone important," she said softly after a while. "They would not put you on the top floor otherwise." She smiled at her own comment, even though she thought he could not see it. "But do not worry, sir. I am not impressed by titles, only by kindness." Grant's heart skipped, not enough to trigger an alarm, but enough for him to notice the strange warmth in her words. Hours passed. The monitors kept their rhythm. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Inside, Anna pulled out her small care journal and began writing down details. Patient stable, skin warm, reaction normal. But then, as if to herself, she added a line she never meant for anyone to read. "He looks peaceful. I hope, wherever his mind is, he feels safe." Enos 10. She closed the notebook and leaned back, exhaustion softening her features. The glow from the monitor painted her face in gentle light. Grant wanted to open his eyes, to tell her he heard everything, but he stayed still. It was too soon. Instead, he listened as she spoke again, this time barely above a whisper. "You know, I took this job because I believe even the hardest hearts can heal. Maybe that includes mine too." Her voice broke slightly at the end, and Grant felt something shift inside him, a spark of empathy he thought he had buried long ago. For the first time since his accident, he was not thinking about revenge or betrayal. He was thinking about the nurse who believed in people even when no one believed in her. As the night deepened, Anna stood to adjust the window blinds. The storm outside had grown heavier, thunder rumbling like a heartbeat in the distance. She turned back to him, unaware that the billionaire she thought was lost to silence had tears forming beneath his closed eyes. And that was how it began. The night a man who faked his coma started to feel alive again. The next evening, the rain had stopped, leaving the air outside crisp and cold. Inside room 907, the lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow. Nurse Anna Monroe entered quietly, balancing a tray with fresh linens and a small cup of herbal tea that she never drank but always brought anyway. It was her small ritual, a comfort she told herself the patient could somehow feel. Good evening again, Mr. Carter, she said gently as she checked the monitors. The soft beeping filled the silence, steady and calm. Another quiet night, huh? That is all right. Quiet means peace. Grant Carter listened from behind his closed eyelids. Every night since she started, she spoke to him as if he were there. She told him about her patients, about her father's illness, about the long subway rides home before sunrise. None of it was rehearsed. It was the kind of truth people only share when they think no one will ever hear. He had spent years surrounded by people who spoke for advantage partners, investors, reporters, but this woman spoke from the heart. It was strange, almost healing, to hear honesty again. Anna replaced his IV bag, careful not to let the tube kink. She moved with quiet confidence, her touch gentle but firm. You know, she said, glancing at his still face, I think people underestimate what silence can do. It listens better than any person. She smiled to herself, unaware that he caught every word. Grant wanted to smile too, but he stayed still. The act had become a test of endurance. The longer he stayed in this role, the more he saw of the world's truth, who showed up out of care, and who came only to check on his fortune. Anna never mentioned his wealth. She treated him like a man, not a name on the news. That was why he could not end the act yet. Hours passed. Anna sat near the window, writing in her small journal again. The pages were filled with steady handwriting and a few pressed flowers she kept between notes. Patient stable, pulse strong, no response, but tone of skin improving. She paused, then added softly, maybe he hears me. Maybe he needs someone to believe in him first. Grant felt his throat tighten. He had built an empire from logic and calculation, but this one woman's faith made him feel more alive than every success he had ever achieved. When her shift was almost over, Anna stood to wipe his forehead with a warm cloth. The scent of soap and lavender drifted through the air. You would not believe how many people give up on the ones who cannot answer, she whispered. But I cannot. I think everyone deserves someone who stays. Her words sank deep into him. He remembered the day his fiancée had signed the release papers at the hospital, declaring there was no point waiting. He had listened to that, too. And now, every time Anna said, I am here, something inside him began to heal. Outside, the clock ticked past 2 in the morning. The building was silent except for the hum of machines. Anna yawned softly and rubbed her eyes. She had another hour left before the morning nurse arrived. She took the empty chair beside his bed and leaned her head on her arms for a moment. Grant watched her from behind his eyelashes. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders relaxed. For a man who had planned everything in life, this was the first moment that felt unplanned and real. He wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to whisper that she was not alone in that room, but he remained still. If he moved now, she would think it was her imagination. Instead, he studied her face, memorizing every line softened by exhaustion and sincerity. She was not beautiful in the polished way the society women were, but there was a quiet grace in her tired eyes, in the way she showed up night after night when others would not. Just before dawn, she stirred awake, startled that she had drifted off. She checked the monitors again, making sure nothing had changed. Everything was steady. She let out a small sigh of relief. I must look so unprofessional right now, she said softly, glancing at him. Do not tell anyone, okay? If he could have laughed, he would have. Instead, he kept listening, his heart a little lighter. Anna gathered her things, replaced the flowers in the small vase on the bedside table, and whispered, See you tomorrow, Mr. Carter. Then she turned off the light and left the room, just as the first glow of sunrise brushed against the window. When the door clicked shut, Grant opened his eyes for the first time in hours. The world looked different in that faint morning light. He sat there, motionless except for the slow rise of his chest, and whispered to the empty room, Tomorrow. It was not a promise to himself, or a test anymore. It was a word filled with possibility, one that she had unknowingly taught him. In the quiet of room 907, as the city below began to stir, the billionaire who had faked a coma was finally beginning to wake up, not just in body, but in heart. The next week passed in quiet rhythm. Each night, Anna came through the door with her calm smile and her small notebook, and each night Grant listened, still pretending to sleep. The hospital had become its own small world, fluorescent lights, soft footsteps, and the sound of her voice filling the air like warmth. By the 7th night, the moon hung full and bright beyond the window. Anna set her bag down and exhaled. "Rough day, Mr. Carter," she murmured, washing her hands at the sink. "We lost a patient downstairs. He was young. Sometimes I wonder why I do this job when it hurts so much." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression heavy but tender. "Then I remember people like you, people who remind me that hope is not useless." Grant wanted to tell her that she was wrong about one thing he did not remind her of. Hope. She had become his hope. She walked to his bedside, checked his pulse, and began to speak softly, as if confessing to an old friend. "I know this sounds strange, but you are the only one I can really talk to. You never interrupt, never judge. Maybe that is why I tell you everything." Grant felt his throat tighten. For days he had debated ending his charade, telling her the truth. But every time he tried to plan the words, fear stopped him. He had built this wall himself, and now he did not know how to step through it without hurting her. Anna sat down beside him and pulled the chair close. The clock ticked past midnight. The hospital hallway outside was empty, silent except for the sound of rain starting again against the glass. She folded her hands and looked at the man she believed to be asleep. "Do you know what I wish?" she whispered. "I wish I could believe that someone like you could hear me. I wish I could believe that people can change. Because if that is true, maybe I can forgive the world a little more." Her voice trembled, the honesty raw and unguarded. She reached for the small notebook at her side, opened to a blank page and began to write. "Entry 12, she said softly. "Patient's condition, unchanged. My condition, uncertain." Her lips curved in a sad smile. "I am starting to care too much for someone who might never open his eyes." A single tear rolled down her cheek, landing on the page. Grant heard her every word. The sound of her quiet sob was the final blow to his defenses. He had begun this deception to prove that the world was shallow, that kindness was a myth. But here she was, proving him wrong with every breath. When she finally closed the notebook and wiped her eyes, she leaned closer to him and whispered, "Good night, Mr. Carter. Wherever you are, I hope you are not lonely anymore." She stood and turned off the lamp, leaving only the silver glow of the monitors. The room fell into stillness. For a long time, Grant lay there, motionless, until at last he could not bear it any longer. His fingers twitched. The movement was small, almost invisible, but real. The heart monitor beeped once, sharper than before. Anna froze at the doorway. Slowly she turned back, eyes wide. "Did I imagine that?" she whispered. She stepped closer, watching his hand. Nothing. The room was silent again. She exhaled and shook her head. "I really must be losing it." She smiled faintly and left the room. As the door closed behind her, Grant opened his eyes into the dark. He stared at the ceiling, breath unsteady, realizing that his game was over. He could not keep lying to the one person who had given him back his humanity. In the pale light of the monitors, the billionaire who had faked a coma whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow, I will tell her the truth." Morning light spilled through the tall windows of room 907. For the first time in months, Grant Carter lay awake with his eyes open, blinking against the brightness. The world seemed louder than he remembered, the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, the low hum of air conditioning, the faint chatter of nurses outside. Every sound meant something now. He was done pretending. A few hours later, when Anna entered for her shift, she stopped short. The air felt different. The monitors showed signs of movement, subtle but steady. She hurried to the bedside and froze when she saw his eyes open, clear and alert. "Mr. Carter," she gasped. "You are awake." Grant blinked slowly, letting his gaze find hers. His throat was dry, his voice rough but steady. "Anna, is refintions is a no-tellments." Hearing her name shocked her even more. "You remember me?" He nodded slightly. "I remember everything." Tears welled up in her eyes. She had imagined this moment 100 times, but it still felt unreal. "This is incredible," she whispered, smiling through the emotion. "You have no idea how happy I am right now." Grant studied her face. She was glowing with relief, genuine and pure. And with that look, guilt tightened his chest. He wanted to tell her the truth right away, but the words would not come. Not yet. Dr. Harris entered with 2 nurses, astonished by the sight. "Mr. Carter, welcome back. We did not expect such progress." They began to run tests, checking reflexes and vitals, bustling around the bed. Grant endured it quietly, his eyes occasionally drifting to Anna. When the room finally cleared, Anna returned with a glass of water. "Here," she said softly. "Small sips." He drank slowly, never taking his eyes off her. "You stayed," he said after a pause. "Of course," she replied, surprised by the question. "I told you I would." Her words hit him harder than she knew. All the people who had once claimed to care for him had vanished the moment his wealth could no longer serve them. Only she had stayed, out of simple decency. As the afternoon faded into evening, Anna adjusted his blanket one last time. "You need rest," she said gently. "You have been through a lot." He looked up at her. "So have you." She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I will be here tomorrow." When she left the room, Grant exhaled, staring at the ceiling. He had survived the test, but at a cost he could not yet measure. The truth he had hidden now weighed heavier than any wound. He knew she deserved honesty, and tomorrow, when she returned, he would finally give it to her. No more lies, no more pretending. In the quiet that followed, the billionaire who had faked a coma whispered to himself, "It is time to make things right. Viet von 5 sat taileu, content mayu 5, TXT to 500 token, kong vit tren canvas. Tip noi von 4, nerdong nyut, nyan vad va boy ken, tuyen toi jian sao cho fu hup. Shu even fong ki tuat vit 3 lai ket qua de lam noidong, YouTube chu kong fai bien tup nu dao dien. Noidong, kong duk vit tat kak tu ma fai vit de du, de voiceover AI doc tot duk. The next morning arrived, with pale light spilling across the white floors of the hospital corridor. Anna hurried toward room 907, her heart full of hope. All night she had thought about the miracle that had happened. After months of silence, Grant Carter was finally awake. She carried a small bouquet of fresh daisies in one hand, thinking they might brighten his room. When she entered, he was already sitting upright, his eyes following the movement of the morning sun. He looked stronger, alive in a way she had never seen before. "Good morning," she said warmly. "How are you feeling today?" He gave a faint smile. "Better, thanks to you." Anna placed the flowers on the table near his bed. "You are recovering quickly. Everyone is amazed." Grant looked at her quietly for a moment. "I owe you more than recovery, Anna. You gave me something I did not even know I needed." She tilted her head, curious. "And what is that?" "Faith," he said softly. "You believed in me when I was nothing more than a name on a machine." Anna felt her cheeks warm. "I just did my job." "No," he replied gently. "You did more than that. You cared." The room fell silent for a long second. Anna smiled shyly and looked down at her hands. "Well, it worked. You are here now." But the softness in his gaze turned heavy with guilt. He wanted to confess everything, to tell her that he had never been in a coma, that he had been watching, listening, judging the world through her kindness. His mouth opened, but the words stuck in his throat. Before he could speak, Dr. Harris entered with his tablet and a brisk smile. "Mr. Carter, we are moving you to observation today. Your progress is remarkable." He nodded to Anna. "Good work, Nurse Monroe. You can prepare the transfer papers." Anna smiled politely, then left to complete the forms. When the door closed, Grant leaned back against the pillow, his thoughts racing. The chance to tell her the truth had slipped away again. Later that afternoon, she returned to escort him to the private recovery wing. He moved slowly, still weak, and she walked beside him, steadying his arm. As they entered the new room, she adjusted his pillow and said, "I will be off shift soon, but I will check on you tomorrow." Grant looked at her with a depth that made her pause. "Anna," he said quietly, "there is something important I need to tell you." "Tomorrow?" She nodded, unaware of what was coming. "Tomorrow, then." When she left, Grant stared out the window at the skyline of the city that had built him and broken him. The truth was waiting on his tongue, and he knew that once he spoke it, nothing would ever be the same again. He whispered into the still air, "Tomorrow? No more lies." When the next day arrived, the hospital felt unusually busy. Nurses hurried down the hallways, doctors moved from room to room, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Anna walked toward Grant's suite with her clipboard in hand. She was tired but content. For the first time in months, the air around room 907 felt light. Inside, Grant Carter sat near the window in a wheelchair, a blanket over his legs, staring out at the city skyline. The morning light painted his face with quiet determination. When Anna stepped in, he turned to her and smiled faintly. "You kept your promise," he said. I always do, she replied. How are you feeling? Restless, he admitted. But not because of the recovery. Anna frowned slightly. Then what is it? He looked down at his hands. There is something I need to tell you. Something I should have said the moment I woke up. Before he could continue, a sharp knock interrupted him. Dr. Harris entered, followed by a woman in a tailored suit carrying a tablet. Mr. Carter, the doctor began. This is Miss Blake from the corporate board. She has brought documents requiring your attention. It is fine, das was a brong. Then now were word of prize. Anna stepped back, unsure if she should leave, but Grant motioned for her to stay. The woman spoke briskly, her tone all business. Sir, there have been significant issues within Carter Industries during your absence. Some board members acted without your authorization. She paused, glancing at Anna with polite disinterest. We need your signature to begin the internal review. Grant's jaw tightened. He took the tablet, scrolling through the reports, his expression darkening. So, my brother was involved, he muttered. Miss Blake hesitated. Yes, sir. He moved company funds without disclosure. The board assumed you were incapable of approving anything. Anna's heart sank. She had not known the full story behind his accident, but now she saw the shadow of betrayal behind his eyes. Thank you, Grant said shortly. Leave the papers here. I will handle it. It's same life thing. When they left, the room grew quiet again. Anna looked at him, her voice soft. That must be hard to hear. He nodded slowly. It is not surprising. That is why I disappeared. That is why I pretended. Anna froze. Pretended? Grant took a breath. I was never in a coma, Anna. I was conscious the entire time. I needed to know if there was still goodness left in the world, if anyone could care for me without expecting something in return. And you did. Her face went pale. You mean, you heard everything I said? Yes, he said quietly. Every word. The silence that followed was heavier than any machine in the room. Anna stepped back, her eyes wide with disbelief. You lied to everyone. To me. Anna, please. But she shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. I thought you were different. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt like an ending. Grant sat motionless, the weight of his truth crushing the relief he had hoped for. The city lights flickered beyond the window, cold and distant. He had finally told the truth, but it had cost him the one person who had made him believe in it. The days that followed were painfully quiet. Grant Carter remained in his hospital room, the air heavy with the absence of Anna Monroe. Her laughter, her calm voice, and the sound of her footsteps in the hallway, all of it was gone. She had taken leave from the hospital the morning after their confrontation, and no one seemed to know where she had gone. He sat by the window, staring at the skyline that once meant victory and pride. Now it felt empty. Every word she had said to him during those long nights echoed in his mind. Everyone deserves someone who stays. She had stayed until he shattered her trust. Dr. Harris stopped by on the third day, carrying his usual clipboard. Your recovery is exceptional, Mr. Carter, he said, trying to sound encouraging. You could be discharged within a week. Grant nodded absently. That will not change what I broke. The doctor hesitated. If this is about Nurse Monroe, give her time. She is one of the best nurses we have ever had. She simply cares deeply. I know, Grant said quietly. That was what made her different. That evening, he opened the drawer beside his bed and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. Anna's handwriting filled every page, her care notes, her thoughts, her quiet confessions written during his false coma. The last entry read, He looks peaceful. Maybe he will wake up to a kinder world. Grant closed the book, pain cutting through him. She was the kindness, he thought, and I destroyed it. The next morning, he left the hospital earlier than planned. The boardroom at Carter Industries waited for him, full of tension and half-hidden guilt. His brother Thomas stood at the far end of the table, pale and nervous. Grant, Thomas began. I can explain. No need, Grant interrupted calmly. You tried to take what was not yours. You succeeded for a while. But I am not here for revenge. The board members exchanged confused glances. I am reinstating every employee you cut during your so-called restructuring. I am transferring 20% of my dividends into a new foundation, one that will fund healthcare workers who dedicate their lives to helping others. He looked straight at his brother. Because some people still understand what real care means. The room was silent. The decision was final. Later that night, back in his penthouse overlooking the city, Grant sat in the dark with only the glow of the notebook in his hands. He turned to the last page and began to write beneath her words. "You were right. The world can be kinder. Because you showed me how." He closed the book and whispered, "Anna, I will find you, and I will make this right." The city outside sparkled with the promise of redemption, but inside his chest the emptiness remained. For the first time, the billionaire who had faked a coma was the one waiting, hoping that the woman who had healed him once might still believe in forgiveness. 2 weeks later, spring sunlight poured across the glass walls of a downtown convention center. Reporters, doctors, and nurses gathered beneath a banner that read, "The Human Pulse Foundation, Restoring Faith in Care." Cameras flashed, and at the center of the stage stood Grant Carter, no longer the patient in silence but a man transformed. He wore a simple gray suit, no luxury watch, no entourage. His voice carried steady through the microphone. "There was a time," he began, "when I stopped believing in people. I had wealth, success, everything the world calls valuable. But I had no faith left. It took one person's kindness to wake me up, not from a coma, but from blindness." Whispers moved through the crowd. In the front row, Dr. Harris listened with quiet pride. Grant continued, "This foundation will provide scholarships for nurses, support for hospitals, and grants for medical workers who serve from the heart, because compassion deserves to be honored, not overlooked." He paused, looking toward the audience as if searching for someone. "I hope she is listening tonight. The nurse who reminded me that humanity still matters. Her name is Anna Monroe." For a moment, the hall went completely silent. Then, from the back row, a familiar voice spoke softly. "I am listening." Every head turned. Anna stepped forward slowly, her hair tied neatly, wearing a modest blue dress. She looked nervous but composed. Grant's breath caught as their eyes met for the first time since that painful day. He descended the stage and stopped in front of her. "Anna," he said gently, "I built this foundation because of you. I cannot undo what I did, but I can live differently because of what you taught me." Anna's eyes glistened. "You really did all of this?" "Yes," he replied, "and it is only the beginning." The crowd watched in silence as she smiled faintly, the wall between them softening. In that moment, the man who had once faked a coma and the nurse who had refused to give up on him finally stood as equals, proof that healing does not begin with medicine, but with truth. The evening air outside the convention center was warm and gentle. The city lights shimmered like distant stars as people slowly left the event, still speaking about the speech that had touched their hearts. Grant and Anna stood together on the quiet terrace overlooking the skyline. For the first time since their lives had crossed, there were no walls, no lies, only honesty. "Do you still hate me for what I did?" he asked softly. Anna looked at him, her expression calm. "I did not hate you, Grant. I was hurt, but I also saw what you became after the truth came out. That matters more." He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You once said everyone deserves someone who stays. I did not stay for you then, but I want to now, if you will let me." She smiled faintly. "Then stay. No contracts, no pretending, just truth." Grant reached into his jacket and handed her a small velvet box. Inside was not a diamond ring, but a silver pen, engraved with the words, "You healed me first." "It is not about promises," he said. "It is about remembering what made me alive again." Anna's eyes softened as she accepted it. "You have come a long way, Mr. Carter." "Thanks to you, Miss Monroe." They stood in silence, the wind carrying the faint sound of laughter from inside. The city that once symbolized power now reflected something gentler hope. Under the glowing skyline, the billionaire who had faked a coma and the nurse who had taught him compassion began a new chapter, not as patient and caregiver, but as two people who finally believed in healing and in love.